A couple of weeks ago, Joe Rogan had Robert W. Malone on the podcast. Malone is one of the darlings of the vaccine resistance movement. He calls himself the inventor of mRNA vaccine technology. That's a bit of a reach, but he is the first author on this 1989 paper when he was a grad student at the Salk Institute. Most agree that this was seminal work on the vaccines that now save so many lives, and that Malone now warns against. He has particularly targeted the Pfizer shots, which an awful lot of smart people have taken. By way of explaining the near maniacal attachment that many progressives have to COVID protocols, Malone referenced something he called mass formation psychosis.
From basically European intellectual inquiry into what the heck happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s. Very intelligent, highly educated population, and they went barking mad. And how did that happen? The answer is mass formation psychosis.
This is an idea he borrowed from a Belgian professor of clinical psychology named Mattias Desmet. Soon, the term swept through the vaccine resistance movement. They were stoked because they thought Malone had compared supermaskers to psychotic Nazis. When left-wing media caught wind of it, their reaction was swift and ruthless. Tons of articles denouncing Malone and even Desmet. Mass formation? There's no such thing. This is the world we find ourselves in. Constant tit for tat. I investigated Desmet's theory and found an excellent podcast where he spoke with a fellow named Aubrey Marcus. I'm guessing that this is the podcast that Robert Malone had seen. You may know Aubrey Marcus. He's the founder of On It, a longtime sponsor of Rogan's podcast. I'll link to that very thoughtful conversation below. Professor Desmet's theory of mass formation is nothing very new. He doesn't call it psychosis, though. He calls it a form of hypnosis. The basic idea goes like this. In order for masses to form around a narrative or an authoritarian leader, 4 conditions have to be in place. Number 1 is a general breakdown of social bonds. The population feels isolated and alienated. Number 2 is a feeling that their day-to-day lives are meaningless. Number 3 is a sort of free-floating anxiety, largely as a result of numbers 1 and 2. Number 4 is the frustration and even aggression that blooms out of 1, 2, and 3. I don't know about you, but the only thing that makes me aggressive is frustration. So this is all sound stuff, all very much in keeping with what we know about evolutionary psychology. Desmet portrays a population of stressed out, spiritually isolated humans who've lost touch with the meaning of their lives. He then talks about what happens when a narrative arrives, a narrative compelling enough to bring meaning back and to join them with others in solidarity. A narrative that will make them feel connected, useful, and even heroic. This is how to form a mass of minds that behaves very much like one mind, like one hypnotized mind. Showbiz hypnotists are fond of putting subjects under and then getting them to do silly things. Like my liberal neighbors walking alone on a beautiful breezy day, masked up as if the sky itself is a cloud of contagion. Last night, I walked past the karate dojo down the street and saw fully masked 8-year-olds 10 feet apart going through their paces. In the parking lot, lit by Home Depot work lights in an area cordoned off by yellow crime scene tape. Hypnotized? You tell me. Professor Desmet explains how a mass, once formed, can be mobilized by dark ideas and extreme strategies, with actions usually focused on the other. He does briefly touch on Nazi Germany and the scapegoating of the Jews, but spends a lot more time talking about Stalinist Russia. He notes that the crazier the claims are about the other, the more hypnotic the effect, as if the sheer absurdity of a given belief lends it an air of secret knowledge, an ultimate truth that outsiders are too blind to see. We've seen cults that adopt all sorts of crazy ideas and end badly. Heaven's Gate, for example. First, they castrated themselves, and then they killed themselves in order to ascend to a spaceship hiding behind the Hale-Bopp comet. Makes sense to me. Desmet makes it clear that the hypnotized are not stupid or ignorant, they're just human. Humans are wired to form groups for good or ill. His theory just explains how the inborn characteristics of the human brain, given certain conditions, can be hijacked into terribly destructive mass movements. Noting the hive mind mentality of progressives who love their COVID restrictions is not new. Way back in the summer of 2020, I was calling them the branch Covidians and comparing their endless precautions and rituals to the religious ablutions of cult members. Desmet and Marcus did apply this concept to the supermaskers. I'm sure this is why Malone took the idea to Rogan and the vaccination resistance glommed onto this idea so eagerly. Regular viewers of this channel have heard me say many times that in the podcast universe, progressive intellectuals like Sam Harris, Eric Weinstein, Steven Pinker, and Jonathan Haidt have been the best friends we conservatives could have in the fight against wokeness, which is also a version of mass formation hypnosis. Desmet and Marcus strike me as that same kind of good liberal men. And on their podcast, they are doing what liberal men of integrity do. They are policing the excesses of their own tribe. On the right, we admire liberals who dare to stand up to the group mind narratives of the left. If only we would appreciate that same act of integrity when a conservative opposes a group mind narrative on the right. As a guy whose successful YouTube channel was blown to smithereens because I refused to move in lockstep with either of the two right-wing narratives that dominated 2021, I assure you that individual integrity is not so highly valued on the right these days. I said that, of course, Democrats used propaganda and dirty politics against Trump, but that I had no reason to believe that there was massive voter fraud in 2020. That made me a traitor in the eyes of about a third of my listeners. Subscribers left in droves. Later, after hesitating for several months and doing a shit ton of reading and talking with doctors, I took the Pfizer vaccine and explained my decision in a video. That cost us another 1,000 subscribers. My partner thought that was a good time to leave the channel. As I have said here before, the anti-vax movement on the right is just a reboot of the Stop the Steal movement. Same people, same mass formation. Only this time, there's no leader. When Trump came into office, he did so largely on his ability to mobilize people. Americans had become more isolated as our social institutions had been gradually replaced by social media. We were disappearing into the devices we held in our hands. Anybody paying attention knew that. In the blue-collar world, our lives became less meaningful as our jobs disappeared and our values were undermined. It seemed that the educated elites treated us with contempt when they noticed us at all. We felt anxious and discouraged. Donald Trump understood that. He turned our frustrations into solidarity and a sense of purpose. But his catchphrases did have a touch of scapegoating attached to them, didn't they? Lock her up, build the wall, drain the swamp. Trump formed working-class conservatives into a mass movement. I reject the left's framing of Trump as an authoritarian. Still, reading my own audience through tens of thousands of comments, I noticed a shift taking place in 2018 and 19. In 2016, conservatives knew that we were sending a flawed man to do our bidding because we needed a street fighter to defend our values. But over time, a large segment of our viewership developed an almost religious devotion to the man himself. I don't know that Trump hypnotized anybody. I think social media algorithms and biased media helped us to hypnotize ourselves, those who loved him and those who hated him as well. By the time that we faced a pandemic, our tribal divisions were such that we had to divide over COVID-19. We didn't know how to do anything else. Trump, being a can-do optimist, tended to downplay the threat. This caused anti-Trump forces to overstate the threat, which made us act more and more casual, which made them ratchet up the fear, and back and forth and back and forth. Now it's at a point where fully vaccinated liberals run for cover even from the mild Omicron, which at worst might give them the sniffles for 4 or 5 days. On the other hand, during the nasty Delta variant, my Facebook newsfeed was awash with anti-vaccine propaganda. Many of my friends proselytized against vaccines while tens of thousands of unvaxxed Americans died needlessly. 9 out of every 10 COVID deaths in that period, unvaccinated. I tell you, I don't recognize those people anymore. So yeah, we have a case of battling mass formations. one hypnosis butting heads with another hypnosis. On the left, millions of liberal people refuse to let any good news about the pandemic pass through their group mind filter. And even as every notable Republican leader, including Trump himself, has advised people to get vaccinated, millions of conservatives flatly refuse. None of these people are really thinking for themselves, are they? I mean, it is possible to take coronavirus seriously while being equally concerned about the damage done to society by overreacting. And it's possible to push back hard against undue restrictions while also inoculating yourself and your loved ones against serious illness and death. But that requires nuanced thinking and an open mind. Groupthink doesn't tolerate either of those things. Aubrey Marcus chose to end his talk with Mattias Desmet with a quote from Jordan Peterson's hero, Carl Jung.
Well, I want to end with something, a positive message that actually came from Carl Jung. He says, "It is not for nothing that our age cries out for the Redeemer personality, for the one who can emancipate himself from the grip of the collective psychosis, save at least his own soul, who lights a beacon of hope for others, proclaiming that here is at least one man who has succeeded in extricating himself from the fatal identity within the group psyche."
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
And it's just a beautiful message to say, look, even if you don't say anything, even if you don't go out there, like, emancipate yourself. You know, like, this is crucial. Like, be the living example of someone who is free and someone who can generate their own thoughts and have agency and you know, be aware of your own biases, be aware of your own, you know, desire for confirmation, be aware of your own desire to be better than other. It's all okay. We're all human, but, you know, liberate yourself with that awareness. And that's a great way to stand in this world where people are really subject to, you know, phenomenon like mass formation.
It's a very nice quote. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Again, I'll link the whole podcast below. Thanks to all of you who continue to support this channel. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.